German submarine U-1. In February 1935, workers at the Deutsche Werke shipyards in Kiel laid the keel for a vessel that should never have existed. But this wasn't just any submarine. It carried a secret that would terrify the Allied powers. U-1 represents the first open German defiance of the Treaty of Versailles submarine ban, a deliberate slap in the face to the victorious Allies of World War I. Hitler had abrogated the Treaty of Versailles earlier that year, and now Germany was ready to show the world exactly what that meant. The Type II coastal submarine, based on the Finnish Vasikko design, measured just over 40 meters in length with a surface displacement of 254 tons. When U-1 was launched on June 15, 1935, and commissioned on June 29, Nazi propaganda made sure the entire world knew that Germany's submarine force had returned. This wasn't done in secret. It was a calculated announcement that the restrictions imposed after Germany's defeat in 1918 were now meaningless. The submarine specifications were modest by later standards: 13 knots on the surface, just under 7 knots submerged, with a crew of 25 men. U-1 conducted only 2 wartime patrols in 1940, both against British shipping off the Norwegian coast. The first patrol from March 15th to 29th found no targets. The second patrol began April 4th, 1940, as Germany prepared for Operation Weserübung, the invasion of Norway. U-1 sent a brief radio signal on April 6th, giving its position, and then vanished forever. U-1 had struck a mine in British minefield field number 7 in the North Sea north of Terschelling. The entire aft section was blown off, and all hands were lost. Divers found the wreck in June 2007, confirming the total destruction. But while U-1 met its fate in a minefield, Japan was preparing submarines that dwarfed anything Germany had imagined. Japanese submarine I-7, 1937, Japanese submarine I-7. When this massive vessel was commissioned in 1937, it represented everything the London Naval Treaty was designed to prevent. Little did the world know, Japan was preparing something far more ambitious than treaty violations. I-7 was the first J-3 type submarine, designed as a large cruiser submarine that could serve as a squadron flagship. At 2,231 tons surface displacement and over 109 meters in length, it violated every size restriction the London Naval Treaty had established for submarines. The Imperial Japanese Navy had systematically designed A-7 to combine the features of their Junsen and Kaidai 5-type submarines, creating a vessel capable of extended ocean operations. This wasn't an accident or oversight. It was deliberate preparation for the kind of unrestricted submarine warfare Japan intended to wage. The submarine carried a Watanabe E-9W-1 float plane, giving it reconnaissance capabilities that extended far beyond what any treaty signatory had envisioned for submarine operations. I-7's war record proved the effectiveness of Japan's treaty violations. On December 7, 1941, it patrolled north of Oahu during the Pearl Harbor attack, positioned to intercept any American ships attempting to escape the devastation. 16 days later, the submarine launched its float plane to assess the damage at Pearl Harbor, providing crucial intelligence for future Japanese operations. In the Indian Ocean, I-7 demonstrated its long-range capabilities by sinking the Dutch motor vessel Mercus on March 4, 1942, and the British motor vessel Glenshiel on April 3. During the Guadalcanal campaign, it bombarded Allied positions at Espiritu Santo and conducted reconnaissance missions that helped coordinate Japanese naval operations. I-7 met its end on June 22, 1943, after a prolonged engagement with USS Monaghan off Kiska in heavy fog, detected by American radar, and it was hit multiple times, causing catastrophic flooding and fires that killed 87 of its crew. But I-7's sister submarine would undertake a mission that defied all imagination and commit acts that shocked the world. Japanese submarine I-8, 1938. Japanese submarine I-8. This Junsen 3-type submarine was commissioned in 1938 as one of the largest Japanese submarines completed before World War II, designed to project power across entire oceans. But I-8's most notorious chapter was yet to be written, and it would shock the world. I-8 was designed as a submarine aircraft carrier with a surface displacement of 2,525 tons violating every international agreement about submarine construction. The vessel served in virtually every major Pacific theater: Pearl Harbor, the U.S. West Coast, Guadalcanal, and the Okinawa Campaign. But its most remarkable achievement was the 1943 Yanagi mission, a technology exchange with Nazi Germany that made I-8 the only submarine to complete a round-trip voyage between Japan and Europe during the entire war. This 30,000 nautical mile journey through storm-tossed seas and enemy-controlled waters demonstrated the extreme capabilities that Japan had built into its treaty-violating submarine fleet. The mission exchanged critical technology. Japanese torpedoes, floatplanes, and engines went to Germany, while German submarine guidance systems and other innovations came back to Japan. Under Commander Tatsunosuke Arizumi from 1944, I-8 began a campaign of terror in the Indian Ocean that violated every principle of civilized warfare. On March 26, 1944, after sinking the Dutch steamship SS Chiselak, Arizumi ordered his crew to murder approximately 98 to 103 survivors in the water. 4 months later, after sinking SS Jean Nicolet, they repeated these atrocities, killing 77 to 95 survivors. These weren't heat-of-battle decisions. They were calculated massacres that turned submarine warfare into systematic murder. Arizumi had transformed his submarine into an instrument of war crimes that shocked even hardened military observers. I-8 was finally sunk on March 31, 1945, by USS Stockton and USS Morrison off the Kerama Islands. Depth-charged and forced to surface, it capsized under gunfire with only one unconscious survivor rescued from the carnage. While Japan perfected the art of submarine warfare, Germany was preparing its own legendary ace to strike at the heart of British naval power. German U-boat U-47, 1938. German submarine U-47. When this Type 7B U-boat was commissioned on December 17, 1938, under the command of Günther Prien, few could have predicted it would achieve the most audacious submarine attack in naval history. What happened next would become one of the most daring submarine attacks in history. U-47 was built in direct violation of pre-1935 arms limitations at the Friedrich Krupp Germania Werft shipyard, representing Germany's growing confidence in rejecting international restriction. The 753-ton submarine belonged to the 7th U-boat flotilla and would conduct 10 patrols, totaling 238 days at sea. But it was Prien's tactical brilliance that would make U-47 legendary. The commander had studied aerial photographs and maritime charts of Scapa Flow, the Royal Navy's supposedly impregnable anchorage in the Orkney Islands. British naval strategists considered the base unassailable, protected by anti-submarine booms, block ships, and treacherous currents. No submarine had ever successfully penetrated its defenses. Prien identified a narrow navigation channel through Kirk Sound that might, just might, allow a submarine to slip through under cover of darkness. On the night of October 14, 1939, U-47 surfaced in Scapa Flow and found HMS Royal Oak, a World War I-era battleship, anchored in the supposedly safe harbor. Prien fired a spread of torpedoes that sent the 29,150-ton battleship to the bottom in minutes, killing 835 British sailors. The psychological impact on the Royal Navy was devastating. If Scapa Flow wasn't safe, nowhere was safe. Hitler personally received Prien and his crew in Berlin, using the attack as a massive propaganda victory. Prien earned the nickname Bull of Scapa Flow and became the first U-boat commander to receive the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. U-47 went on to sink 30 merchant ships, totaling 162,769 gross registered tons, but it disappeared on March 7th in 1941 during its 10th patrol near Rockall Bank. All 45 crew members are presumed to have died, but as U-47 vanished into legend, Japan was deploying submarines designed for the most audacious naval attack in history. Japanese submarine Y-15, 1940. Japanese submarine Y-15. This Type B-1 submarine was commissioned in 1940 as part of Japan's systematic expansion beyond all treaty limitations, designed for the long-range operations that would define Pacific warfare. But I-15's role in America's darkest day was just the beginning of its war. I-15 represented Japan's commitment to submarine-based fleet reconnaissance. Oz with a surface displacement of 2,584 tons and the ability to carry a Yokosuka E-14Y floatplane for extended scouting missions. The submarine was specifically positioned as part of the submarine cordon supporting the December 7, 1941 Pearl Harbor attack, while Nakajima B-5 and Kate bombers and HED-3 Aval dive bombers devastated Battleship Row. I-15 patrolled north of Oahu with orders to intercept and destroy any American ships attempting to escape the harbor. The submarine's mission was to maximize the carnage by preventing any American vessels from reaching the open ocean where they might organize a counterattack. When a U.S. task force, including a Lexington-class carrier, did attempt to pursue the Japanese strike force, HKE-15 joined the pursuit but failed to achieve any torpedo hits. 3 months later, I-15 demonstrated the innovative tactics that Japan's treaty-violating submarines enabled. During Operation K-1 in February and March 1942, the submarine supported a second attack on Pearl Harbor by refueling Kawanishi H-8K flying boats at French frigate shoals. These massive 4-engine flying boats then dropped bombs on Honolulu, proving that Japan could strike American territory whenever it chose. I-15 later reconnoitered the Aleutian Islands during the Japanese invasion of Attu and Kiska, operations that stretched across thousands of miles of the North Pacific. I-15 was sunk on November 10, 1942, by USS Southern off San Cristobal Island during the Guadalcanal campaign. Detected on the surface, it was depth-charged and destroyed by gunfire, taking all 91 crew members to the bottom. If you're fascinated by these forbidden submarines, hit that subscribe button for more untold naval history. As the Pacific burned, Germany's Red Devil was preparing to drag America into an undeclared war. German U-boat U-552, 1940. German submarine U-552. When this Type 7 U-boat was commissioned on December 4, 1940, its crew painted a grinning red devil on the conning tower that would become the symbol of unrestricted submarine warfare. The Red Devil's next target would drag America into an undeclared war. U-552 was built despite existing arms agreements and achieved exceptional success during what German submariners called the Second Happy Time, the devastating U-boat campaign off the American coast in 1942. The submarine operated for over 3 years, conducting 15 patrols and participating in 21 Wolfpack operations that terrorized Allied shipping. Under the command of Erich Topp, U-552 perfected the tactics that made German U-boats the terror of the Atlantic. The Red Devil's crew developed an aggressive hunting philosophy that prioritized maximum tonnage sunk per patrol, leading them to take risks that other submarines avoided. This approach would soon create an international incident that pushed America closer to war. On October 31, 1941, while the United States was still officially neutral, U-552 torpedoed the destroyer USS Reuben James while it was escorting British convoy HX-156. The attack killed 115 American sailors, including all the ship's officers, making Reuben James the first U.S. Navy warship lost in World War II. The sinking created a massive diplomatic crisis and directly led to amendments to the Neutrality Act that allowed American merchant ships to be armed and enter combat zones. 5 months later, on April 3, 1942, U-552 sank the American tanker SS David H. Atwater off the U.S. coast during Operation Drumbeat, demonstrating that German submarines could strike American targets with impunity. U-552 survived the entire war, eventually being transferred to training duties in May 1944 as Allied anti-submarine warfare became too effective for frontline operations. The Red Devil was scuttled on May 5, 1945, at Wilhelmshaven to prevent capture. But while the Red Devil terrorized Allied shipping, Germany's most deadly ace was perfecting the silent kill. German U-boat U-99, 1940. German submarine U-99. This Type 7B U-boat was commissioned on April 18, 1940, under the command of Otto Kretschmer, a submarine ace who would revolutionize underwater warfare through pure tactical genius. Under the command of Silent Otto, This submarine would rewrite the rules of underwater warfare. U-99 was built in violation of treaty prohibitions and became the most successful German submarine by tonnage of enemy shipping sunk. Kretschmer earned his nickname Silent Otto by avoiding radio communications that could reveal his position, preferring to strike without warning and disappear back into the depths. His revolutionary tactic was the surface night attack, infiltrating Allied convoys on the surface under cover of darkness, firing torpedoes at point-blank range, then submerging before escort vessels could respond. This approach maximized surprise while minimizing detection, allowing U-99 to achieve kills that seemed impossible to Allied naval strategists. Kretschmer's crew became legends for their precision and efficiency, turning submarine warfare into a deadly art form. Traditional submarine doctrine called for submerged attacks from distance, but Kretschmer proved that aggressive surface tactics could achieve far superior results. U-99's most spectacular attack occurred when Kretschmer encountered the armed merchant cruisers HMS Laurentic and HMS Patroclus. In just 7 hours, using 10 precisely aimed torpedoes, U-99 sank both massive vessels, demonstrating the tactical superiority that made German submarines so feared. The submarine disrupted major Allied convoys including HX-77, SC-7, and HX-112, sinking 38 ships for a total of 244,658 gross registered tons. Each patrol was a masterclass in submarine warfare that influenced how both sides approached convoy operations for the remainder of the war. On March 17, 1941, after firing its last torpedoes at the Norwegian steamship Korshavn, U-99 was detected by HMS Walker and HMS Vanek southeast of Iceland. Forced to surface under depth-charge barrage, Kretschmer signaled for rescue before scuttling his submarine. 40 crew members, including Kretschmer himself, were captured as prisoners of war. As Germany's submarine aces fell one by one, the Americans were about to capture something that would change everything. German U-boat U-505, 1941. German submarine U-505. This Type 9C submarine was commissioned on August 26, 1941, amid Germany's systematic disregard for naval restrictions. But it would achieve fame for reasons no German submariner could have imagined. What the Americans discovered inside would change the course of the war. U-505 had the dubious distinction of being the most heavily damaged U-boat to successfully return to port in World War II, surviving 6 botched patrols that broke the morale of its crew. The submarine's operational history was marked by mechanical failures, crew psychology problems, and increasingly desperate leadership. Commander Peter Zesch became the only submarine commanding officer to commit suicide under combat conditions when he shot himself in October 1943, unable to cope with the psychological pressure of repeated failures and near-constant depth-charge attacks. This incident reflected the deteriorating state of German submarine operations as Allied anti-submarine warfare became increasingly effective. U-505's crew was demoralized, and the submarine was considered unlucky by the entire U-boat fleet. On June 4, 1944, U-505 was attacked by U.S. Navy Task Group 22.3 off Cape Blanc in French West Africa. Instead of fighting to the death as U-boat doctrine demanded, the commander ordered abandonment after suffering depth-charge damage. American sailors boarded the submarine while it was still afloat, the first enemy warship boarded by the U.S. Navy since the War of 1812. Inside U-505, the Americans discovered an intelligence treasure trove, Enigma machines, codebooks, and operational documents that provided unprecedented access to German submarine communications. The crew was secretly isolated in a special prisoner of war camp and officially declared dead by Germany to maintain operational security around the capture. The intelligence from U-505 shortened the war by enabling Allied forces to reroute convoys away from German submarine patrol areas and break German naval codes more effectively. Today, U-505 is a museum ship in Chicago, one of only 4 surviving World War II U-boats. But as the Atlantic War raged, Japan was constructing something that would dwarf every submarine ever built. Japanese submarine I-400, 1944. Japanese submarine I-400. When this Sentoku-type submarine was commissioned in 1944, It was the largest submarine ever built, a distinction it would hold until 1965. And this submarine was designed to strike at the heart of American logistics. But fate had other plans. I-400 represented the absolute pinnacle of Japan's disregard for international naval treaties, with a surface displacement of 5,200 to 23 tons and a length of 122 meters. The submarine was designed specifically to launch surprise airstrikes against the Panama Canal, using 3 Aichi M6A1 Siren floatplanes, carried in a massive cylindrical hangar. Japanese naval strategists recognized that destroying the Panama Canal would cripple American logistics by forcing ships to travel around Cape Horn, potentially extending the war by years. The submarine's figure-of-8 pressure hull design was revolutionary and providing the structural strength necessary to support the aircraft hangar while maintaining underwater integrity. Construction began in January 1943 at Kure Naval Arsenal, despite enormous wartime pressures on Japanese shipbuilding resources. Initial plans called for attacks on San Francisco and other West Coast targets, but these were rejected as too risky. By June 1945, operational plans had shifted to Operation Arashi, a coordinated attack on the Allied fleet anchorage at Ulithi, using 6 Siren floatplanes armed with 800-kilogram bombs. The pilots were to receive hormone injections to improve their night vision for the attack. I-400 spent months training in Nanao Bay, perfecting the complex procedures needed to launch all 3 aircraft within 45 minutes. The submarine's crew practiced Panama Canal strike scenarios, preparing to attack the Gatun locks that controlled ship traffic between the Atlantic and Pacific. Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945, canceled the Panama Canal mission just as I-400 was preparing to depart. The submarine surrendered on August 27, 1945, and was sunk as a target on June 4, 1946, to prevent Soviet access to its advanced technology. But I-400's sister submarine was preparing for one final mission that could have changed the war's outcome. Japanese submarine I-401, 1945. Japanese submarine I-401. This Sentoku-type submarine was commissioned in 1945 as the final expression of Japan's complete abandonment of naval treaty restrictions. It was designed for strategic bombing missions that could have altered the course of history. As the war reached its climax, I-401 prepared for a mission that could have changed everything. I-401 exemplified Japan's unchecked submarine development in the war's final phase, representing the technological pinnacle of submarine aircraft carriers. With specifications identical to its sister ship, I-400 5,223 tons, surface displacement, 122 meters length, and the ability to carry 3 Siren float planes. I-401 was designed to project Japanese air power across the Pacific when conventional aircraft carriers had become too vulnerable to operate. The submarine survived multiple airstrikes, including strafing during a U.S. attack on Kure in January 1945, but suffered significant damage in April when it ran aground and hit a mine. Repairs in May included installation of a snorkel system that would allow extended submerged operations, essential for survival in increasingly dangerous Pacific waters. By July 1945, I-401 was assigned to Operation Arashi, alongside I-400, preparing for a coordinated nighttime bombing attack on Ulithi anchorage where the U.S. Pacific Fleet was concentrated. The plan called for 6 Siren floatplanes to strike simultaneously, with pilots receiving hormone injections to enhance their night vision for the attack. I-401 departed Japan on July 23, 1945, successfully navigating through a massive typhoon and evading Allied detection as it sailed toward its target. The crew had provisions for 3 months and fuel for extended operations, demonstrating Japan's commitment to continue fighting despite increasingly hopeless strategic circumstances. Emperor Hirohito's surrender announcement on August 15, 1945, reached March 401 while it was en route to its target. Captain Arizumi initially doubted the authenticity of the surrender order and prepared to continue the mission, but subsequent confirmations forced him to abort the operation. I-401 surrendered to USS Segundo on August 29, 1945, after dumping its bombs and torpedoes. Captain Arizumi committed suicide on August 30th, 1945, rather than face the disgrace of surrender. These 10 forbidden submarines prove that in total war, international law becomes the first casualty. For more incredible submarine stories, watch this video about the deadliest submarine disasters of World War II.